Don't worry about the NRA. They're on our side. You guys, half of you are so afraid of the NRA. There's nothing to be afraid of. And you know what? If they're not with you, we have to fight them every once in a while. That's okay. They're doing what they think is right. I will tell you, they are doing what they think is right. But sometimes we're going to have to be very tough, and we're going to have to fight them.
All right, the president seems to be willing to challenge the NRA on a lot of these issues that have come up since the Florida school shooting. To Michigan Democratic Congressman Dan Kildee. Congressman, very good to have you. What did you think of that?
Well, I think the president's absolutely right. You know, I will say this, that the president says a lot of things. I'll be anxious to see what that means, what it translates to. But, you know, when he says something that I agree with, I'm obligated to say amen. And what he said is what I think would make a difference in the debates that take place in Congress. It certainly would have made a difference with my bump stock bill. I was listening to your program
what
before
happened
I
with
came
that,
on.
Congressman? Because that seemed to have near unanimous support, and I don't even know what killed it.
Well, I think the president's comments are right on point. It was the NRA who said no. They did not want Congress to act on bump stocks. I had a bill that I did with 3 other members of Congress, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. We don't agree on everything, but we agreed on that. We sat down literally in my office and worked out language that was reasonable. And we thought we had people on both sides of the issue ready to go, including the NRA. But right after we introduced it, they said, no, we don't want Congress to act on this.
Well, I had a representative of the NRA, and I'm probably not getting all the details right, sir, so you can certainly correct me, was that there were attachments to this that it found and maybe others found unacceptable. I don't know where the truth is, but I thought if you can't get a slam dunk like that one, then how is the president going to be able to look at raising the age at which certain people can get their hands on these guns, or even stricter background checks?
Yeah, I agree. And I think it would send a message that there are things that we can agree on, and maybe that would provide the momentum that this place needs to actually roll up our sleeves and just solve these problems. You know, the bump stock issue obviously is not a pervasive problem, but had this been on the books before, it would have saved lives in Las Vegas. We ought to do the things that we know can make a difference. You know, I understand that there was some pushback. The bill that we wrote was real simple. It just said that if a machine gun can't be bought and sold in the United States, then any device that turns a semi-automatic weapon into a machine gun should be treated the same way. And for whatever reason, I don't think they wanted to see any momentum around gun law, and it lost the opportunity to do something that really made a lot of sense.
Yeah, it did seem like, you know, an easy gimme there, but to your point, nothing, I guess, is easy in Washington. But I did want to touch on something quickly before we go, sir, and that is where both sides, the Democrats and Republicans, give ground to constituencies that are important to them. You talk about the NRA with Republicans challenging them on the age at which you can get a weapon or stricter background checks. Then the president threw out there, as he has prior, this idea that we have a lot of violent video games and movies, and that's the Hollywood community endeared to Democrats. Do you think there is ground there for both sides to go after their sacred cows?
I sure think so. I mean, I agree that the kind of imagery that is presented to kids in this country actually creates a more violent society, and we ought to be willing to do something about that. And as Democrats, we have to be willing to say, you know, I understand that there's a different point of view on this, but we have a job to do here. And the same is true of my Republican friends. We have a job to do here. What the NRA says or what Hollywood says might be interesting, might be helpful, but neither of those interests should have a veto over the responsibilities that we have to do our job. Sometimes being a leader means you have to disappoint your own supporters once in a while, and I think this is the moment where that may have to be the case.
Are you sure you're a United States congressman and work in Washington? No, sir, very good to have you. Thank you very much. Very common sense ideas. I appreciate it.